Welcome to today's therapeutic sleep session, the psychology of guilt after self-pleasure. Tonight's healing journey addresses sexual shame through transformative storytelling, guiding you toward integration, self-acceptance, and recognizing your sexuality is sacred rather than shameful. Beyond the boundaries of linear time, healing stories emerge from the quantum field of infinite possibility. Tonight, consciousness shifts to receive wisdom through narrative, where transformation becomes as natural as breathing. In dimensions unseen, your journey toward wholeness unfolds through the sacred art of storytelling. There exists a realm where healing happens through metaphor, where psychological patterns dissolve into understanding, where shame transforms into self-compassion. This is the space between sleeping and waking, where stories live in their purest form, carrying medicine for the soul. Through the portal of imagination, truth reveals itself not as judgment, but as gentle recognition. Here, in the ethereal landscape of narrative consciousness, we discover that healing doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. The stories that emerge from this sacred space carry frequencies of transformation, vibrations that resonate with the deepest chambers of the human heart. In this twilight realm, where possibility meets reality, we find Sage, a character whose journey mirrors the universal human experience of navigating shame, guilt, and the path toward wholesome self-acceptance. Tonight, through Sage's story, we explore the delicate landscape of human sexuality, the weight of inherited shame, and the profound liberation that comes from embracing our complete humanity. The narrative that unfolds carries ancient wisdom, wrapped in modern understanding. It speaks to the part of us that remembers wholeness. The aspect of self that knows our natural state is one of loving acceptance rather than harsh judgment. Through Sage's transformation, we access our own capacity for healing, our own readiness to release what no longer serves our highest good. This is not merely a story. It is a transmission of healing energy, a therapeutic journey designed to reach the subconscious mind where true transformation occurs. As we follow Sage's path from shame to self-compassion, from guilt to grace, we activate our own internal healing mechanisms, our own capacity for profound change. The setting emerges from the mists of consciousness, a retreat center nestled in ancient redwood forests, where the air itself seems to carry healing properties. Here, among trees that have witnessed centuries of human growth and transformation, Sage begins a journey that will fundamentally alter the relationship between body, mind, and spirit. In this sacred space, shame cannot survive the light of understanding. Guilt dissolves in the presence of compassion. The harsh inner critic that has long ruled with fear-based authority begins to soften, replaced by a wise and loving inner voice that speaks truth with tenderness. Sage awakens each morning at the Serenity Springs Retreat Center with a familiar knot in their stomach, a tightness that has become as routine as brushing teeth or checking email. This internal tension, this constant companion of unease, speaks to a deeper struggle that has shadowed Sage's adult life like a persistent storm cloud. At 34, Sage embodies the paradox of modern spiritual seeking. Outwardly successful, inwardly tormented. As a wellness coach who helps others find balance and self-acceptance, Sage carries the weight of knowing how to heal while struggling to apply that same wisdom to their own life. The irony isn't lost on them. How can someone who teaches self-love struggle so profoundly with accepting their own natural desires? The retreat center, with its towering redwoods and gentle morning mist, represents both sanctuary and confrontation. Sage chose this place not for vacation, but for healing, recognizing that the time has come to address the shadow that has influenced every intimate relationship, every moment of solitude, every attempt at genuine self-connection. The guilt that haunts Sage isn't about any action that harms others. It's about the most personal and private expressions of human sexuality. Each time Sage experiences the natural pleasure of self-intimacy, the aftermath brings a crushing wave of shame, as if some fundamental law of goodness has been violated. This pattern, established in adolescence and reinforced through years of cultural messaging, has created a prison of self-judgment that seems impossible to escape. Sage's childhood home was one of well-meaning but emotionally constrained parents who viewed sexuality as dangerous territory, something to be discussed only in hushed tones and moral frameworks. The messages weren't explicitly shaming, but they created an atmosphere where natural human desires became associated with spiritual failure, moral weakness, and personal inadequacy. Now, sitting in the meditation garden of the retreat center, Sage recognizes that this internal battle has affected every aspect of life. Romantic relationships have been marked by emotional distance, an inability to fully receive pleasure or express authentic desire. The connection between mind and body has been severed by layers of shame, creating a fragmented sense of self that yearns for integration. The retreat center specializes in what they call somatic spirituality, the integration of body wisdom with spiritual development. Sage chose this particular program because it promised to address the false dichotomy between spiritual growth and sexual wholeness, between purity and pleasure, between being good and being human. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the retreat's founder, has spent decades studying the intersection of sexuality and spirituality across cultures. Her approach recognizes that shame around natural human desires creates fractures in the psyche that affect every aspect of well-being. The healing she offers isn't about moral permission to engage in behavior. It's about recognizing that the shame itself is the problem, not the natural human desires it seeks to suppress. Sage's journey at the retreat begins with a simple but profound recognition. The guilt experienced after self-pleasure isn't based on any actual harm caused to self or others. It's a learned response, a psychological pattern that can be unlearned through understanding, compassion, and skillful therapeutic intervention. The character of Sage represents millions of people who carry similar burdens individuals raised in environments where sexuality was seen as separate from spirituality, where pleasure was viewed with suspicion, where the natural desires of the human body were categorized as somehow less holy than other aspects of human experience. The Serenity Springs Retreat Center exists in a pocket of Northern California, where ancient redwoods create cathedral-like spaces between earth and sky. The center itself was designed by architects who understood that healing environments must speak to something deeper than aesthetic beauty. They must create spaces where the soul feels safe to reveal its vulnerabilities. The main lodge, constructed from reclaimed wood and local stone, seems to have grown from the forest floor rather than being imposed upon it. Large windows frame views of towering trees, whose presence evokes timelessness, stability, and the patient wisdom of nature. The architecture itself becomes part of the therapeutic process, offering visual metaphors for groundedness, growth, and the natural cycles of renewal. Dr. Vasquez chose this location specifically because of its energetic properties. The land had been inhabited by indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and their understanding of the sacred nature of human sexuality still seems to permeate the environment. Unlike the shame-based approaches to sexuality that dominate Western culture, indigenous wisdom traditions often view sexual energy as life force itself, creative, powerful, and inherently sacred. The retreat center's hot springs emerge from deep underground, carrying minerals that have been filtering through the earth for millennia. These waters, naturally heated by the planet's core, provide a perfect metaphor for the healing process. What emerges from the depths carries transformative properties, but only when we're willing to immerse ourselves fully in the experience. The program Sage has entered is called Embodied Wholeness, a 6-day intensive that addresses the artificial separation between sexuality and spirituality. The curriculum draws from multiple healing traditions: Jungian psychology's understanding of shadow integration, somatic experiencing's focus on body wisdom, tantric traditions that view sexual energy as spiritual energy, and contemporary neurosciences. Insights into how shame creates neural pathways that can be rewired through conscious practice. The Retreat Center's library contains texts from across cultures and centuries, all pointing toward the same fundamental truth: healthy sexuality is not separate from spiritual development but integral to it. The shame that many participants carry isn't based on spiritual truth, but on cultural conditioning that has created false dichotomies between body and spirit, pleasure and purity, human and divine. The daily schedule at the retreat reflects this. Integration. Morning meditation sits alongside afternoon workshops on conscious sexuality. Yoga practices that honor the body's wisdom are followed by group discussions that explore the psychological roots of sexual shame. Art therapy sessions allow participants to express experiences that words cannot capture, while nature walks provide opportunities for grounding and reflection. The other participants in Sage's cohort come from diverse backgrounds but share similar struggles. There's Maria, a former nun who left religious life but carries decades of conditioning around sexuality and spirituality. James, a corporate executive whose high-achieving lifestyle masks deep insecurity about his most intimate desires. Sarah, a new mother struggling to reconcile her identity as a spiritual person with her needs for physical pleasure and connection. The Retreat Center's therapeutic approach recognizes that healing happens not in isolation, but in community. The sharing circles that punctuate each day create opportunities for participants to witness each other's struggles and breakthroughs, to recognize that their personal shame is part of a larger cultural pattern that affects millions of people. Dr. Vasquez has structured the program around what she calls graduated vulnerability. Participants are never asked to share more than feels safe, but the environment consistently invites deeper levels of honesty and self-acceptance. The physical space itself supports this process. Private rooms for individual reflection, small group spaces for intimate sharing, and large common areas where the entire community can gather. The natural environment surrounding the retreat center becomes an active participant in the healing process. The redwoods, some over 1,000 years old, serve as witnesses to the human journey toward wholeness. Their presence reminds participants that growth happens slowly, that healing is a process rather than an event, that resilience comes from deep roots and flexible branches. The retreat center's gardens showcase plants from traditions that have honored sexuality as sacred, roses that represent the divine feminine, jasmine that has been used in love rituals across cultures, herbs that support healthy sexual function and emotional balance. These botanical teachers offer visual reminders that sexuality is woven into the fabric of life itself, not separate from it. The morning mist clings to the redwoods as Sage begins the difficult work of examining life patterns with Dr. Vasquez. In the cozy counseling cabin, surrounded by books on sexuality and spirituality, the microscope turns inward to examine the daily rhythms that have shaped Sage's relationship with pleasure and shame. "Tell me about Tuesday," Dr. Vasquez invites, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who has heard countless stories without judgment. Not the Tuesday you think I want to hear about, but the actual Tuesday that lives in your body's memory. Sage shifts in the comfortable chair, feeling the familiar tightness in chest and throat that accompanies any conversation about sexuality. Even in this safe space, with a therapist who specializes in sexual healing, the old patterns of shame activate like smoke detectors responding to the slightest hint of heat. Tuesday starts like most days. Sage begins, then pauses, recognizing the automatic tendency to sanitize the story. Actually, Tuesday starts with the dream. I wake up from a dream where I'm being intimate with someone, and the first feeling isn't pleasure or curiosity. It's this immediate sense of having done something wrong. Even in sleep, even in the privacy of my own unconscious mind, there's this voice that says I shouldn't be having these experiences. Dr. Vasquez nods, making notes that somehow feel supportive rather than clinical. What does that voice sound like? Is it your voice, or does it carry other tones? The question unlocks something Sage has never articulated. It's my mother's voice, but also my grandmother's, and maybe even voices from church sermons I heard as a child. It's this chorus of well-meaning people who somehow convinced me that my body's natural responses were spiritual failures. The session continues with careful excavation of Tuesday's emotional landscape. Sage describes the morning routine that has become a ritual of self-soothing, extra long shower, specific breakfast foods, particular music that creates a cocoon of comfort. These behaviors, analyzed through the lens of healing, reveal themselves as attempts to manage anxiety rather than address its root causes. The afternoon is when it usually happens, Sage continues, referring to self-pleasure with the indirect language that has become habitual. I'm alone, relaxed, maybe reading or watching something beautiful. There's this natural unfolding of desire, this sense of aliveness in my body that feels innocent, actually, pure. Like I'm connecting with something essential about being human. The description captures the paradox that defines Sage's struggle. The experience itself feels natural and healthy, but the aftermath becomes a battlefield of self-judgment. Dr. Vasquez helps Sage map the sequence of events that follows moments of sexual pleasure, the immediate physical satisfaction, followed within minutes by crushing guilt, then hours of emotional self-flagellation, and finally days of spiritual depression. It's like I have two completely different relationships with my own body, Sage reflects. During the experience, I feel connected, alive, grateful for the capacity to feel pleasure. But afterward, it's like I've committed some unforgivable sin. The shame is so intense that it makes me question whether I'm a good person, whether I'm spiritual enough, whether I deserve love or respect. Dr. Vasquez introduces the concept of neural pathways of shame, the way repeated patterns of guilt create highways in the brain that make shame the default response to sexual experience. These pathways, established during adolescence and reinforced through years of cultural messaging, have become so automatic that they feel like truth rather than learned behavior. The behavioral archaeology reveals other patterns that stem from sexual shame. Sage describes difficulty receiving compliments about physical appearance, a tendency to over-spiritualize every aspect of life as if to compensate for perceived moral failures, and a pattern of attracting romantic partners who are emotionally unavailable or judgmental about sexuality. I've noticed that I'm attracted to people who confirm my sense of being somehow flawed, Sage admits. It's like I choose partners who will maintain the familiar dynamic of shame rather than challenge it. The few times I've been with someone who was comfortable with sexuality, who saw it as natural and beautiful, I found myself pulling away. It felt too good to be true. The session explores how shame about sexuality has affected other areas of life. Sage recognizes patterns of people-pleasing that stem from deep insecurity about worthiness, a tendency to overwork as if to compensate for perceived moral failures, and difficulty setting boundaries because of an underlying belief that bad people don't deserve to have their needs respected. Dr. Vasquez helps Sage understand that these patterns are actually creative adaptations to impossible cultural messages. You learn to survive in an environment that gave you contradictory information about your own nature, she explains. Your nervous system develops strategies to manage the anxiety of being human in a culture that shames humanity. The patterns you've developed aren't character flaws. They're survival mechanisms that made sense given the information you had. The excavation reveals the profound cost of carrying sexual shame. Sage describes years of feeling disconnected from their own body, of viewing physical needs as inconveniences rather than information, of struggling to trust their own desires and instincts. The shame has created a fragmented sense of self, where the spiritual and physical aspects of identity seem to be in constant conflict. The afternoon session takes place in the retreat center's memory room, a circular space designed to feel like a safe container for exploring difficult histories. Sage settles into the comfortable cushions as Dr. Vasquez guides them through the delicate process of examining the roots of sexual shame. Every pattern of shame has an origin story. Dr. Vasquez begins gently. Usually, it's not one dramatic event, but a series of small moments that taught your nervous system to associate sexuality with danger, badness, or spiritual failure. These early experiences created protective mechanisms in your psyche that are still active today. Sage's earliest memory involves being 5 years old and discovering the natural pleasure of touching their own body. The memory is hazy but carries a distinct emotional flavor. The innocent joy of discovery suddenly interrupted by a sharp correction from a caregiver. I remember being told that good children don't touch themselves there, Sage recalls. The tone wasn't angry, but it was firm, and it carried this implication that what I was doing was somehow wrong. The session explores how this early message created the foundation for lifelong patterns. A 5-year-old's brain doesn't have the capacity to distinguish between this behavior is inappropriate in public and this desire is fundamentally wrong. The message that lodged in Sage's developing psyche was simpler and more damaging. My body's natural responses make me bad. Dr. Vasquez helps Sage understand the developmental context of these early experiences. Children are naturally curious about their bodies, she explains. Self-touch is a normal part of human development, as natural as exploring any other aspect of their environment. When that exploration is met with shame or fear, it creates confusion about their own nature. The origin story continues through adolescence, where natural sexual development intersected with religious and cultural messages about purity. Sage remembers youth group discussions where sexual desire was portrayed as a temptation to be overcome, rather than a natural part of human development. The implicit message was that truly spiritual people could transcend their physical nature rather than integrate it. I remember feeling like I was living a double life, Sage reflects. During the day, I was the good kid who got straight A's and volunteered at church. But at night, I was dealing with these desires and responses that felt completely contradictory to who I was supposed to be. It was like I was two different people, and they couldn't coexist. The session explores how this internal split created the foundation for adult patterns of shame. Unable to reconcile their spiritual identity with their sexual nature, Sage learned to compartmentalize, to view sexuality as separate from the rest of their identity. This compartmentalization, while serving as a survival mechanism during adolescence, became a prison in adulthood. Dr. Vasquez introduces the concept of protective wisdom, the way seemingly dysfunctional patterns actually served important functions at earlier stages of development. The shame you developed around sexuality wasn't a mistake, she explains. It was your psyche's way of protecting you from rejection, punishment, or abandonment. Your system learned that expressing sexual desire could threaten your belonging. In important communities, the origin story reveals layers of cultural conditioning that extends beyond individual family dynamics. Sage grew up in a society where sexuality is simultaneously commercialized and shamed, where sexual desire is used to sell products but condemned as spiritual weakness. These contradictory messages created an environment where healthy sexual development became nearly impossible. I remember being told that sex was this beautiful gift from God that was meant for marriage. Sage continues, but then getting the message that even thinking about it was sinful. How is a teenager supposed to make sense of that? How do you honor something as sacred while simultaneously trying to suppress every natural response to it? The session explores how these early messages created what Dr. Vasquez calls somatic confusion, a state where the body's natural responses become associated with psychological danger. Over time, this confusion creates a chronic state of internal conflict where pleasure and guilt become neurologically linked. The pattern that developed made sense given the information you had, Dr. Vasquez emphasizes. Your nervous system learned to associate sexual pleasure with social and spiritual danger. The guilt you experience isn't a sign of moral failure. It's your system's way of trying to protect you from threats that no longer exist. The origin story also reveals moments of hope and connection. Sage remembers brief periods where sexuality felt natural and beautiful, usually in the context of meaningful relationships, where partners were able to communicate openly about desire and pleasure. These experiences, while rare, provided glimpses of what integrated sexuality might feel like. There was one relationship where I felt like I could be completely myself, Sage recalls. We talked about everything, including sexuality, with this amazing openness. For the first time, I felt like my desires were normal and healthy, but I found myself pulling away from that relationship because it felt too good to be true. I couldn't trust that someone could love me knowing all of me. The session concludes with an important reframe. The patterns of shame that have caused so much suffering are actually evidence of Sage's deep sensitivity and care. You develop these patterns because you care about being good, about belonging, about living with integrity, Dr. Vasquez explains. The same sensitivity that created your shame is also your pathway to healing. The evening session takes place outdoors, under the canopy of ancient redwoods where the last light of day filters through branches that have witnessed centuries of human growth and transformation. Sage sits on a moss-covered log, feeling the solid earth beneath them as Dr. Vasquez guides them through an exploration of where old patterns meet present moment awareness. There comes a point in every healing journey, Dr. Vasquez begins, where the protective mechanisms that once served us begin to limit our growth. The patterns that helped you survive earlier challenges may now be preventing you from experiencing the wholeness you're seeking. Sage takes a deep breath, feeling the cool forest air fill their lungs. I'm starting to see that, they admit. The shame that I thought was protecting me from being a bad person is actually preventing me from being a whole person. It's like I've been trying to be spiritual by rejecting part of my humanity. The session explores the specific ways that old patterns have outlived their usefulness. Sage describes recent experiences where the automatic guilt response has prevented them from fully receiving pleasure, intimacy, and connection. Last week, I was with someone I really care about, Sage shares. We were being intimate, and it was beautiful and loving and felt completely natural. But even in that moment, I could feel this voice in my head questioning whether I deserved to feel that good, whether there was something wrong with enjoying physical pleasure so much. Dr. Vasquez helps Sage recognize that this internal voice, while originally protective, has become a barrier to authentic relationship, both with others and with themselves. The critic in your head that questions your worthiness isn't actually keeping you safe anymore, she explains. It's creating distance from your own experience, from your own body, from your own capacity for joy. The collision between old patterns and present moment awareness creates what Dr. Vasquez calls sacred tension, the uncomfortable but necessary space where transformation becomes possible. Sage feels this tension as a physical sensation in their chest, a tightness that speaks to the difficulty of changing deeply ingrained patterns. I'm noticing that I'm ready for something different, Sage reflects. The old way of relating to my sexuality feels exhausting. I'm tired of feeling guilty about natural desires, tired of apologizing for being human, tired of treating my body like an enemy instead of a friend. The session explores this readiness for change as a crucial indicator of healing potential. Readiness isn't about having all the answers, Dr. Vasquez explains. It's about being willing to question the assumptions that have been running your life. It's about developing curiosity about alternative ways of being. Sage describes a recent moment of clarity that occurred during morning meditation. I was sitting quietly, and suddenly I had this realization that the shame I carry about sexuality isn't actually based on any spiritual truth. It's based on cultural conditioning that has nothing to do with my relationship with the divine. For just a moment, I felt what it might be like to experience my sexuality as part of my spiritual nature, rather than separate from it. This glimpse of possibility, while brief, represents a significant shift in Sage's internal landscape. The recognition that shame is learned, rather than inherent, creates space for new possibilities to emerge. That moment was so brief, but it felt like a doorway opening, Sage continues. I could sense that there's a way of being that doesn't require me to be divided against myself. The session explores the natural resistance that emerges when long-held patterns are challenged. Sage describes the fear that comes with the possibility of change. What if I let go of the shame and become someone my family doesn't recognize? What if I embrace my sexuality and lose my spiritual identity? What if I'm wrong about what's okay and what isn't? Dr. Vasquez helps Sage understand that this resistance is also protective. It's the psyche's way of maintaining stability in the face of significant change. The part of you that resists change isn't trying to keep you stuck, she explains. It's trying to make sure you don't change too quickly or in ways that might be harmful. We can honor that protective voice while still moving toward greater wholeness. The collision between old patterns and new possibilities creates what feels like an internal earthquake. Sage experiences this as physical sensations: butterflies in the stomach, tightness in the throat, a feeling of groundlessness that's both frightening and exciting. It's like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff, Sage describes. I can see the other side, but I'm not sure I have the courage to jump. The session concludes with an important recognition. The fact that Sage is questioning old patterns means that transformation is already underway. You're not the same person who walked into this retreat, Dr. Vasquez observes. The questioning, the discomfort, the readiness for change, these are all signs that your psyche is preparing for a new way of being. As the evening light fades and the forest settles into its nocturnal rhythm, Sage feels a quiet stirring of possibility. The old patterns of shame are still present, but they no longer feel like absolute truth. There's a crack in the foundation of certainty, and through that crack, new light is beginning to emerge. The third morning at the retreat center dawns with unusual clarity, as if the atmosphere itself has been cleansed by the emotional work of the previous days. Sage walks through the morning mist to the central pavilion, where Dr. Vasquez has arranged a special session with Dr. Amara Okafor, a visiting teacher who specializes in the intersection of sexuality and spirituality. Across global wisdom traditions, Dr. Okafor embodies the integration that Sage seeks. She moves with the grace of someone who has found peace between her spiritual and sexual natures. Her presence alone challenges the assumption that deep spirituality requires the suppression of physical desire. As she settles into the circle of cushions, her eyes hold both the wisdom of a seasoned teacher and the warmth of someone who has walked the path of healing. I've been asked to share with you today because my journey mirrors yours in many ways. Dr. Okafor begins, her voice carrying the musical quality of someone who has spent years in both meditation halls and sexuality workshops. I, too, was raised in a tradition that viewed sexuality as separate from spirituality, as something that had to be transcended rather than integrated. She tells the story of her own awakening, how she spent years as a devoted spiritual practitioner, believing that true enlightenment required celibacy and the complete suppression of sexual energy. I meditated for hours each day, studied sacred texts, and genuinely believed I was advancing toward truth. But there was always this underlying sense of incompleteness, as if I was trying to become holy by rejecting essential aspects of my humanity. Sage leans forward, recognizing their own story in Dr. Okafor's words. What changed? They ask. I encountered a teacher who asked me a simple question that shattered my assumptions, Dr. Okafor replies. She asked me to explain why the divine would create sexual energy if it was meant to be an obstacle to spiritual development. She pointed out that in nature, sexual energy is creative energy. It's the force that brings forth new life, that connects beings in profound intimacy, that generates the passion necessary for any form of creation. The session explores this radical reframe. What if sexual energy isn't separate from spiritual energy, but is spiritual energy expressing itself through the body? Dr. Okafor draws from tantric traditions, indigenous wisdom teachings, and contemporary research in neuroscience to paint a picture of integrated spirituality that honors the full spectrum of human experience. In many cultures, she explains, sexual union is seen as a mirror of divine union. The capacity to experience pleasure in the body is viewed as a reflection of the soul's capacity to unite with the divine. The shame we carry about sexuality isn't based on spiritual truth. It's based on cultural conditioning that has forgotten this essential connection. Sage feels something shifting inside, as if tectonic plates of belief are beginning to move. But what about the voice that says sexual pleasure is selfish or base? They ask, how do I know the difference between healthy desire and spiritual bypassing? Dr. Okafor's response is both gentle and revolutionary. The difference lies in consciousness and intention. When sexuality is approached with awareness, respect, and connection, whether with a partner or in solitude, it becomes a practice of presence rather than an escape from it. The shame you feel isn't protecting you from spiritual error. It's preventing you from experiencing the sacred nature of your own body. The session continues with practical exercises designed to help Sage experience this integration directly. Dr. Okafor guides them through a meditation that involves sending loving awareness to every part of the body, including the sexual organs. Notice what happens when you extend the same loving attention to your genitals that you would to your heart. She instructs. Sage initially feels the familiar tightness of resistance, but as they continue the practice, something unexpected happens. The loving awareness that they've cultivated through years of spiritual practice begins to extend to previously forbidden territories. For the first time in years, Sage experiences their sexual nature as part of their spiritual identity rather than separate from it. I feel integrated, Sage whispers, tears streaming down their face. Like I don't have to choose between being spiritual and being sexual. Like they're different expressions of the same essential energy. Dr. Okafor nods knowingly. This is the remembering that your soul has been waiting for. The shame that has caused you so much suffering isn't based on truth. It's based on a collective forgetting of our essential wholeness. As you heal this split within yourself, you contribute to healing it in the larger human family. The session explores how this integration might look in daily life. Dr. Okafor suggests that self-pleasure, when approached with consciousness and self-love, can actually become a spiritual practice, a way of honoring the gift of incarnation, of celebrating the body as a temple of the divine, of experiencing the creative force that animates all existence. The guilt you feel afterward isn't coming from your soul, she explains. It's coming from internalized voices that have forgotten the sacred nature of embodied existence. As you practice approaching your sexuality with the same reverence you bring to meditation or prayer, those voices will gradually be replaced by wisdom that recognizes the divine in all aspects of your humanity. The days following the session with Dr. Okafor unfold like a gentle experiment in new ways of being. Sage approaches each moment with the curiosity of a scientist exploring uncharted territory, testing the possibility that sexuality and spirituality might not be enemies, but allies in the journey toward wholeness. The first experiment happens during morning meditation. Instead of trying to transcend the body, Sage follows Dr. Okafor's guidance to include the body more fully in spiritual practice. Sitting in the garden pavilion, surrounded by the morning sounds of awakening forest, Sage extends loving awareness to every part of their physical being. "I'm breathing love into my heart," Sage whispers internally, feeling the familiar warmth of spiritual practice. "I'm breathing love into my mind, into my hands, into my feet." The practice continues systematically through the body, and when awareness reaches the sexual organs, Sage pauses. The old pattern would be to skip over these areas or to feel guilty about including them. But following Dr. Okafor's guidance, Sage breathes loving awareness into their genitals with the same reverence they would offer to any other part of their body. The result is surprising. Instead of feeling sexualized or inappropriate, the practice feels more complete, more integrated, more genuinely spiritual. "I feel like I'm honoring the fullness of who I am," Sage reflects afterward. "Like I'm not trying to be spiritual by rejecting parts of myself, but by including everything in the field of loving awareness." The second experiment occurs during an afternoon walk in the forest. Sage notices the rising of natural sexual energy, the kind of embodied aliveness that would normally trigger immediate guilt. Instead of pushing the feeling away, they try Dr. Okafor's suggestion to experience it as life force energy, as the same creative power that moves through all of nature. Walking among the towering redwoods, Sage allows the sensation of aliveness to flow through their body without judgment. The experience is revelatory. The energy that they've been taught to suppress as base or selfish begins to feel like a celebration of being alive, a recognition of the creative force that animates all existence. It's like the difference between seeing sexuality as taking something from the world versus contributing to the world's aliveness, Sage realizes. "When I approach it with consciousness and reverence, it feels like I'm participating in the creative energy that makes flowers bloom and trees grow toward the sun." The third experiment comes during an evening of solitude in their retreat cabin. Sage has been avoiding this particular test, knowing that self-pleasure has been the most shame-inducing aspect of their sexual experience. But feeling supported by the work with Dr. Okafor and the safety of the retreat environment, they decide to explore whether this most private intimacy might also be transformed through consciousness. The approach is completely different from habitual patterns. Instead of rushing toward physical release, Sage begins with extended meditation, setting an intention to approach their body with the same reverence they would bring to any sacred practice. The experience unfolds slowly, with breath, awareness, and loving attention. "I'm honoring my body as a temple," Sage whispers, feeling the words resonate in their bones. "I'm celebrating the gift of being able to experience pleasure. I'm connecting with the creative force that moves through all of existence." The physical experience that follows is transformed by this conscious approach. Instead of feeling separate from their spiritual nature, Sage experiences sexual pleasure as an expression of spiritual energy. The climax, when it comes, feels less like a loss of control and more like a moment of divine union, a temporary dissolution of the boundaries between self and cosmos. The real test comes in the minutes afterward. Sage lies quietly, waiting for the familiar crushing wave of guilt to arrive. They feel their nervous system preparing for the old pattern of shame, like a flinch before an expected blow. But something unexpected happens. The guilt doesn't come. Instead, Sage feels a profound sense of gratitude for their body's capacity to experience pleasure, for the gift of being alive in physical form, for the opportunity to experience the creative force that moves through all existence. The sensation is so unfamiliar that they almost don't recognize it as the absence of shame. I feel innocent, Sage whispers to the quiet cabin. Like I just did something beautiful instead of something wrong. Like I just prayed with my body instead of sinning against my spirit. The experiment continues over the following days as días. Sage explores bringing this same conscious approach to other aspects of their relationship with sexuality. They practice receiving compliments about their physical appearance without deflecting or minimizing them. They engage in conversations about sexuality with other retreat participants without the familiar shame-based defensiveness. Each small experiment builds evidence that contradicts the foundational belief that has governed Sage's life for decades. The voice that has insisted sexuality is separate from spirituality begins to quiet, replaced by embodied, knowing that integration is not only possible, but natural. I'm starting to understand that the division between sexuality and spirituality was never real. Sage reflects during an evening session with Dr. Vasquez. It was a learned belief that I accepted as truth, but my actual experience is teaching me something completely different. Dr. Vasquez encouraged Sage to trust these emerging insights while remaining patient with the parts of their psyche that are still adjusting to the new paradigm. Change happens in layers, she explains. The logical mind might understand these concepts quickly, but the nervous system needs time to develop new patterns of response. Be gentle with yourself as you integrate these discoveries. The experimental phase reveals that transformation doesn't require dramatic events or perfect implementation. Small shifts in consciousness, approached with consistency and compassion, create profound changes in lived experience. Sage discovers that healing happens not through forcing change, but through creating conditions where natural wholeness can emerge. I feel like I'm remembering something I always knew but had forgotten, Sage shares. Like I'm coming home to a part of myself that was never actually missing, just hidden behind layers of learned shame. The breakthrough arrives on the 4th morning, not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of dawn breaking over the mountains. Sage awakens from a dream that feels more like a visiona, experience of themselves as a being of light who experiences all aspects of existence, including sexuality, as expressions of divine creativity. In the dream, Sage stood in a temple that had no walls, where the boundaries between sacred and secular had dissolved completely. Their body was made of starlight, and every sensation, including sexual pleasure, created ripples of luminosity that blessed the entire cosmos. Upon waking, the memory of this expanded state lingers, creating a foundation of knowing that transforms everything. The morning session with Dr. Vasquez takes place in the Retreat Center's chapel, a non-denominational space designed to honor the sacred across all traditions. Sage sits in the gentle morning light streaming through stained glass windows, feeling the lingering vibrations of the night's visionary experience. Something has shifted, Sage begins, their voice carrying a new quality of certainty. I woke up this morning feeling like I finally understand what integration means. Not just intellectually, but in my bones, in my cells, in every part of my being. Dr. Vasquez leans forward with the attentive presence of someone who recognizes a moment of genuine transformation. Tell me what you're experiencing, she invites. I feel like I've been trying to solve the wrong problem, Sage continues. I've been trying to figure out how to be spiritual despite being sexual, but that was based on a false premise. The real truth is that I'm spiritual because I'm sexual, because I'm embodied, because I can experience the full spectrum of human aliveness. The session explores this paradigm shift as it reverberates through every aspect of Sage's self-understanding. The shame that once felt like moral guidance now reveals itself as a barrier to authentic spiritual development. The guilt that seemed to protect virtue now appears as an obstacle to experiencing the divine nature of embodied existence. I keep thinking about what Dr. Okafor said about sexual energy being creative energy, Sage reflects. This morning I realized that every time I experience pleasure in my body, I'm actually participating in the same force that creates galaxies and grows flowers. How could that be anything other than sacred? The breakthrough involves more than intellectual understanding. It includes a fundamental rewiring of the nervous system's response to sexual experience. Sage describes feeling physically different, as if the chronic tension they've carried for years has finally begun to release. There's this softness in my chest that I haven't felt since childhood, they share. Like I've been holding my breath for decades and finally remembered how to exhale. The hypervigilance about being good enough has relaxed into trust that I am good enough, exactly as I am. Dr. Vasquez guides Sage through an exploration of how this transformation affects their relationships with others. When we stop dividing ourselves internally, we naturally become more integrated in our connections with other people, she explains. The shame that created distance from your own sexuality also created distance from intimate connection with others. Sage recognizes this pattern immediately. I've always been attracted to partners who were emotionally unavailable or judgmental about sexuality. I thought I was protecting myself from rejection, but I was actually choosing people who would confirm my own self-rejection. Now I can feel that I'm ready for something completely different. The session explores the ripple effects of this internal integration. Sage describes feeling more creative in their work as a wellness coach, more present in friendships, more comfortable with receiving compliments and affection. The energy that was previously tied up in managing shame has been liberated for authentic self-expression. It's like I've been running software that was constantly checking whether I was good enough, Sage reflects. Now that program has been updated with new information. I am inherently good enough, including and especially the parts of me that experience sexual pleasure. The breakthrough includes a profound shift in Sage's relationship with their own body. Physical sensations that once triggered anxiety now feel like information and invitation. The body, rather than being an obstacle to spiritual development, becomes a trusted teacher and ally in the journey toward wholeness. I touched my arm this morning and felt gratitude for my skin's capacity to experience touch, Sage shares. I looked in the mirror and saw a being of light inhabiting a beautiful body rather than a flawed person trying to transcend their physicality. The shift is so fundamental that I almost don't recognize myself. Dr. Vasquez helps Sage understand that this breakthrough represents the integration of what Jungian psychology calls the shadow, the disowned aspects of self that have been rejected or suppressed. You're not becoming someone new, she explains. You're becoming whole. You're integrating aspects of yourself that were always present, but hidden behind layers of cultural conditioning. The session concludes with Sage expressing a deep sense of coming home to themselves. I feel like I've spent years trying to earn something that was already mine, they reflect. I've been trying to become worthy of love and acceptance by rejecting essential parts of who I am. But this morning, I woke up knowing that wholeness isn't something I have to achieve. It's something I can remember. The breakthrough creates a new foundation for living, thinking, and relating. The old questions about whether sexuality is compatible with spirituality have been replaced by curiosity about how to honor the sacred nature of embodied existence. Shame has been transformed into reverence, guilt into gratitude, self-rejection into self-celebration. I understand now that the deepest spiritual practice might be learning to love ourselves completely, Sage concludes. Not despite our humanity, but because of it. Not by transcending our bodies, but by inhabiting them with consciousness and celebration. The days following Sage's breakthrough unfold like the construction of a new world, built on foundations of integrated wholeness rather than fragmented shame. The morning routines that once served to manage anxiety now become rituals of celebration, honoring the body as a temple and sexuality as a sacred aspect of human existence. Sage awakens each day with a practice that Dr. Okafor taught them full-body blessing that extends loving awareness to every aspect of their physical being. Good morning, beautiful body, Sage whispers, placing hands on heart. Thank you for carrying me through another day of growth and discovery. Thank you for your capacity to experience pleasure, connection, and aliveness. The practice continues systematically through the body, blessing feet for their ability to feel the earth, hands for their capacity to create and caress, sexual organs for their participation in the life force that animates all existence. What once would have triggered immediate shame now feels like the most natural form of morning prayer. The shift affects every aspect of daily life at the retreat center. During yoga sessions, Sage moves with a new quality of embodied presence, inhabiting their body fully rather than trying to escape it through spiritual practice. The poses become expressions of celebration rather than exercises in transcendence. I feel like I'm dancing with my own aliveness, Sage shares during group discussion. Every movement, every breath, every sensation becomes an opportunity to honor the miracle of being embodied. Even the challenging poses feel like prayers of gratitude for having a body that can stretch and strengthen and feel. Meal times transform from automatic consumption to conscious celebration. Sage experiences taste, texture, and nourishment as sensual pleasures that connect them to the life force flowing through all existence. The act of eating becomes a form of communion with the earth that produces food and the body that receives it. Food tastes different when you're not fighting your own capacity for pleasure, Sage observes. Every bite becomes an opportunity to practice receiving goodness from the world. I'm learning that my ability to enjoy food and my ability to enjoy sexuality come from the same source, my capacity to be present with pleasure. The transformation is most profound during interactions with other retreat participants. Sage finds themselves naturally more open, more present, more able to give and receive affection without the defensive filters that once protected them from imagined judgment. Conversations about sexuality, once sources of intense anxiety, become opportunities for authentic connection and mutual healing. I shared my story during group session yesterday, Sage tells Dr. Vasquez. For the first time in my life, I talked about my struggles with sexual shame without feeling ashamed of having struggled. The other participants were so grateful that someone had spoken honestly about what many of us experience. I realized that my healing contributes to collective healing. The shift affects Sage's creative expression as well. During art therapy sessions, they create pieces that celebrate the body rather than trying to transcend it. Paintings flow with sensual colors and organic forms that honor both sexuality and spirituality as aspects of the same essential creativity. My art is becoming more alive, Sage reflects. The colors are richer, the forms more fluid, the overall feeling more joyful. I think I was unconsciously editing out aliveness because I associated it with sexuality, and I associated sexuality with wrongness. Now that those connections have been healed, my creativity feels unleashed. The transformation extends to Sage's professional identity as a wellness coach. They begin to recognize how their own integration of sexuality and spirituality can inform their work with clients who struggle with similar splits. The personal healing becomes a gift they can offer to others. I'm starting to understand that my journey through sexual shame wasn't just personal healing, it was preparation for helping others navigate the same territory, Sage realizes. The integration I found gives me credibility and compassion to support others who are tired of feeling divided against themselves. Evening practices at the retreat center become celebrations rather than attempts to escape the day's experiences. Sage approaches meditation, journaling, and reflection as opportunities to appreciate the fullness of human experience rather than to transcend its challenges. I used to use spiritual practice to get away from being human, Sage shares. Now I use it to become more fully human. The difference is profound. Instead of trying to escape my sexuality through spirituality, I'm learning to express my spirituality through my sexuality. The new reality includes challenges as old patterns occasionally resurface, but Sage meets these moments with compassion rather than self-attack. When familiar voices of shame arise, they respond with the loving firmness of a parent comforting a frightened child. The shame still visits sometimes, Sage acknowledges, but it doesn't move in anymore. I recognize it as an old pattern trying to protect me from dangers that no longer exist. I thank it for its intention and gently redirect my attention toward truth. I am a whole being whose sexuality is part of my sacred nature. The wisdom that emerges from Sage's transformation begins to express itself through every aspect of their being, and how they move through space, how they speak to themselves, how they relate to others, and how they understand their place in the larger web of existence. This isn't intellectual knowledge, but embodied truth that has been integrated at the cellular level. During a walking meditation through the retreat center's forest paths, Sage experiences a profound moment of recognition. Each step on the earth feels like a celebration of the connection between their body and the larger body of nature. The sensuality of feeling moss beneath bare feet, the aliveness that moves through trees and streams, the creative force that brings forth new growth, all of it feels intimately connected to their own sexual energy. I understand now that sexuality isn't separate from nature. It is nature, Sage reflects. The same force that creates seasons and cycles, that brings flowers into bloom and moves water through rivers, moves through my body as sexual aliveness. To shame this energy is to shame life itself. The embodied wisdom transforms Sage's internal dialogue from harsh criticism to loving guidance. The voice that once questioned every moment of pleasure now offers encouragement for authentic self-expression. Where there was once a punitive inner critic, there is now a compassionate inner mentor. I notice that I speak to myself differently now, Sage shares with Dr. Vasquez. When I feel sexual desire, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" I ask, "What is this energy teaching me?" Instead of trying to suppress natural responses, I explore how to honor them with consciousness and care. This shift in self-talk creates ripple effects throughout Sage's emotional landscape. Feelings that were once categorized as shameful or inappropriate are now met with curiosity and acceptance. The capacity to experience the full spectrum of human emotion, including sexual desire, becomes a source of gratitude rather than guilt. The wisdom includes practical skills for navigating sexuality with consciousness. Sage learns to distinguish between healthy sexual expression and patterns that arise from wounding or compulsion. The integration of spirituality and sexuality creates natural boundaries based on self-respect rather than self-denial. I'm learning to ask myself, does this expression of my sexuality honor my wholeness and the wholeness of others? Sage explains. When the answer is yes, I can engage with celebration. When the answer is no, I can choose differently without shaming the underlying energy. The embodied wisdom extends to Sage's capacity for intimate relationship. No longer split between spiritual and sexual identity, They become capable of authentic vulnerability, sharing their desires, fears, and needs without the protective barriers that once kept them isolated. I had coffee with someone I'm attracted to yesterday, Sage shares. For the first time in my life, I was able to express interest without feeling like I was betraying my spiritual values. I could be honest about my attraction while maintaining respect for both of us. The conversation was beautiful because it came from wholeness rather than fragmentation. The wisdom transforms Sage's understanding of boundaries from rigid rules to fluid responsiveness. Instead of predetermined categories of acceptable and unacceptable behavior, they develop the capacity to sense what honors their authentic nature. In each moment, boundaries aren't walls anymore, Sage observes. They're like membranes that allow healthy exchange while protecting my essential self. I can be open to pleasure and connection while maintaining my integrity and self-respect. The embodied wisdom includes recognition of the sacred nature of solitude and self-pleasure. What once triggered crushing guilt now becomes opportunity for communion with the divine nature of embodied existence. Self-intimacy transforms from guilty secret to spiritual practice. I understand now that loving my body is loving the divine. Sage reflects. When I touch myself with reverence and consciousness, I'm honoring the creative force that animates all existence. The pleasure I experience isn't separate from my spiritual life. It is my spiritual life expressing itself through embodied form. The wisdom extends to Sage's understanding of service and contribution. The integration of sexuality and spirituality creates access to creative energy that wants to be channeled toward meaningful work and genuine contribution to collective healing. I feel more creative, more passionate about my work, more committed to helping others find the integration I've discovered, Sage shares. The energy that was tied up in managing shame has been liberated for authentic service. I want to help create a world where people don't have to choose between being spiritual and being sexual. The embodied wisdom includes appreciation for the journey that brought Sage to this point of integration. Even the years of struggle and shame are recognized as necessary preparation for the depth of understanding they now carry. I'm grateful for everything that brought me here, Sage reflects. Even the shame served a purpose. It helped me develop the sensitivity and depth that now allows me to support others on similar journeys. The wound became the gift. The struggle became the strength. The transformation that has occurred within Sage begins to manifest as waves of positive influence that extend far beyond their personal healing. Like stones dropped into still water, the integration of sexuality and spirituality creates expanding circles of change that touch every relationship and interaction. The first ripples appear in Sage's relationships with family members. During a video call with their parents, Sage finds themselves able to engage with love and boundaries rather than reactive shame or defensive distance. The internal integration has created space for authentic connection that doesn't require hiding essential aspects of identity. I had the most amazing conversation with my mother yesterday, Sage shares with their therapy group. For the first time, I wasn't performing the role of the good child who has transcended all earthly desires. I was just present as myself whole, integrated, and peaceful. She actually commented that I seemed more settled, more at peace with myself. The ripple effects extend to Sage's professional work as a wellness coach. Clients immediately notice a quality of presence and authenticity that wasn't available before the integration. Sage's ability to speak honestly about the full spectrum of human experience creates safety for others to explore their own hidden struggles. I had a client yesterday who's been struggling with similar issues around sexuality and spirituality, Sage reports. For the first time, I was able to offer support from a place of integrated understanding rather than intellectual knowledge. The client said they felt seen and understood in a way they'd never experienced before. The transformation creates ripples in the broader retreat community as well. Other participants are inspired by Sage's journey from shame to wholeness, and several begin their own processes of examining inherited beliefs about sexuality and spirituality. The personal healing becomes a catalyst for collective healing. During group sessions, Sage shares their story with increasing openness and confidence. Each telling becomes an invitation for others to examine their own relationships with sexuality, shame, and spiritual identity. The vulnerability that once felt dangerous now becomes a gift of connection and mutual support. 3 other people in our cohort have started working with similar issues after hearing my story, Sage observes. I'm realizing that my healing doesn't just belong to me. It belongs to everyone who has been waiting for permission to integrate these aspects of themselves. The ripple effects extend to Sage's creative expression and artistic endeavors. The liberated energy that was once bound up in managing shame now flows toward projects that celebrate the sacred nature of embodied existence. Sage begins planning workshops that will help others navigate similar transformations. I'm developing a program called Sacred Sexuality, Integrating Body and Spirit. Sage shares excitedly. I want to create safe spaces where people can explore these questions without judgment or shame. I want to offer what I wish had been available when I was struggling. The transformation ripples outward through Sage's social media presence as, well, posts that once focused exclusively on disembodied spirituality now include celebration of embodied existence. The authentic integration attracts people who are hungry for a spirituality that includes rather than excludes human sexuality. I shared a post about my journey yesterday, and the response has been overwhelming, Sage reports. Hundreds of people have shared their own struggles with similar issues. I'm realizing that sexual shame is an epidemic that affects people across all backgrounds and belief systems. The ripple effects include changes in how Sage moves through the world on a daily basis. The integration of sexuality and spirituality creates a quality of presence that others find attractive and inspiring. Conversations, interactions, and chance encounters carry a depth and authenticity that wasn't available before. People are responding to me differently, Sage notices. There's something about integrated presence that others recognize, even if they can't name it. I'm having deeper conversations with strangers, more meaningful connections with colleagues, more authentic intimacy with friends. The transformation begins to influence Sage's understanding of their life purpose and calling. The personal healing becomes a template for the kind of collective healing that the world needs. Sage begins to envision their role in creating cultural change around sexuality and spirituality. I understand now that my journey wasn't just personal, it was preparation for service, Sage reflects. I want to be part of healing the collective trauma around sexuality that affects so many people. I want to help create a world where children grow up understanding that their bodies are sacred, that pleasure is a gift, that sexuality and spirituality are natural allies. The ripple effects extend to romantic relationships as well. Sage finds themselves attracting partners who are also interested in conscious sexuality, who view the body as sacred, who understand that deep intimacy includes both physical and spiritual dimensions. The integration creates capacity for relationships. That had been impossible when sexuality and spirituality were split. I met someone last week who shares this understanding of integrated spirituality, Sage shares. Our conversations about sexuality are also conversations about consciousness, about presence, about celebrating the divine nature of embodied existence. For the first time, I can imagine a relationship that honors all aspects of who I am. The transformation ripples forward into Sage's vision for their own future and their hopes for collective healing. The personal integration becomes a foundation for contributing to cultural transformation that will benefit future generations. I want my grandchildren to grow up in a world where they never have to choose between being spiritual and being sexual. Sage declares, I want them to understand from the beginning that their bodies are temples, that pleasure is sacred, that sexuality is one of the ways the divine expresses itself through human form. On the final morning of the retreat, Sage sits in the pre-dawn darkness of the meditation hall, feeling the profound stillness that comes from no longer fighting aspects of themselves. The integration that has occurred over these transformative days includes embracing what Carl Jung called the shadow, those parts of the psyche that had been relegated to darkness by societal conditioning and personal shame. I'm sitting with all of it now, Sage whispers to the quiet morning. The parts of me that feel desire, the parts that experience pleasure, the parts that have needs and wants and longings. I'm not trying to transcend them or transform them into something more acceptable. I'm learning to love them as they are. The shadow integration process began when Sage stopped trying to be the idealized spiritual person they thought they should be and started accepting the complex, multifaceted human being they actually are. This includes embracing their capacity for sexual desire without apology, their need for physical pleasure without guilt, their attraction to beauty and sensuality without spiritual bypassing. During the week's exploration, Sage discovered that many of the qualities they had rejected as unspiritual were actually sources of vitality and creativity. The passionate intensity they had tried to suppress was the same energy that fueled their commitment to healing and service. The sensuality they had viewed as distraction was actually a pathway to presence and aliveness. I used to think that being spiritual meant eliminating desire, Sage reflects. Now I understand that it means bringing consciousness to desire, honoring its sacred nature while choosing how to express it. The shadow isn't the problem, unconsciousness is the problem. The integration includes accepting their past patterns of shame and self-rejection with compassion rather than judgment. Instead of viewing the years of struggle as time wasted or spiritual failure, Sage recognizes them as a necessary journey that developed the depth and sensitivity now available for helping others. Even my shame served a purpose, Sage acknowledges. It taught me to be careful with sacred things, to approach sexuality with reverence rather than casualness. The challenge was learning to distinguish between healthy reverence and destructive guilt. The shadow integration transforms Sage's relationship with their own complexity. Rather than trying to present a perfect spiritual image to the world, they embrace their multifaceted nature, someone who meditates and experiences sexual desire, who prays and enjoys physical pleasure, who seeks enlightenment and celebrates embodiment. I'm tired of trying to be one-dimensional, Sage declares. I want to be whole, which means including all aspects of my humanity. I want to be someone who can talk about God and also talk about sexuality, who can lead meditation and also celebrate the body's capacity for pleasure. The integration includes releasing the need to have others approve of their spiritual journey. Sage recognizes that some people will be uncomfortable with integrated spirituality that includes sexuality, and they develop the courage to prioritize authenticity over acceptance. I can't control how others respond to my wholeness, Sage realizes. Some people will be threatened by spirituality that doesn't require rejecting sexuality. But I'm not responsible for their comfort. I'm responsible for my integrity. The shadow integration culminates in a moment of profound self-acceptance during morning meditation. Sage experiences a deep knowing that every aspect of their being, including their sexuality, is not only acceptable but sacred, not only forgivable, but celebratable. I feel complete for the first time in my adult life, Sage shares. Not perfect, but complete. Not without areas for growth, but no longer divided against myself. The civil war between my spiritual and sexual nature has ended. in integration rather than victory of one side over the other. As the retreat moves toward its conclusion, Sage experiences what can only be described as soul alignment, a state where every aspect of their being moves in harmony toward the same essential purpose. The integration of sexuality and spirituality has created access to a unified life force that wants to express itself through authentic service and creative contribution. I feel like I've been driving a car with the parking brake on for years, Sage tells Dr. Vasquez during their final individual session. Now that the brake has been released, I can feel the power that was always available but couldn't fully express itself. The energy that was tied up in internal conflict is now available for creating positive change in the world. The soul alignment includes clarity about Sage's unique gifts and how they want to contribute to collective healing. The personal transformation becomes a template for the kind of cultural healing that addresses sexual shame at its roots. Sage feels called to help create a world where future generations won't have to experience the split between sexuality and spirituality. I understand now that my purpose involves helping to heal the collective trauma around sexuality, Sage shares. Not through preaching or teaching doctrine, but through modeling integration, through creating safe spaces for others to explore these questions, through demonstrating that wholeness is possible. The alignment includes a deep sense of connection to the lineage of people who have worked to heal the artificial separation between body and spirit. Sage feels supported by tantric practitioners, indigenous wisdom keepers, progressive theologians, and anyone who has recognized the sacred nature of embodied existence. I'm not alone in this understanding, Sage realizes. Throughout history, there have been people who knew that sexuality and spirituality are natural allies. I'm part of a larger movement toward integration that includes many voices across many traditions. The soul alignment affects Sage's vision for their professional work. Instead of teaching spirituality that ignores sexuality or sexuality that ignores spirituality, they feel called to offer approaches that honor the wholeness of human experience. The personal healing becomes the foundation for authentic service. I want to develop programs that help people integrate these aspects of themselves, Sage envisions. Workshops for individuals, training for therapists and spiritual teachers, resources for parents who want to raise children with healthy attitudes towards sexuality and spirituality. The alignment includes recognition of sexuality as a creative force that extends far beyond physical pleasure. Sage begins to understand sexual energy as the power that animates all creativity, passion, and life-affirming activity. This expanded understanding transforms their relationship with their own desires and ambitions. Sexual energy is creative energy, Sage realizes. It's the force that makes artists create, that makes lovers connect, that makes activists fight for justice, that makes anyone passionate about anything. When I honor my sexual nature, I'm honoring my creative nature. The soul alignment creates natural boundaries that arise from self-respect rather than self-denial. Sage develops the capacity to honor their sexual nature while making conscious choices about how to express it. The integration provides internal guidance that doesn't require external rules or moral frameworks. I don't need someone else to tell me what's appropriate for my sexual expression, Sage declares. I have internal wisdom that knows the difference between celebration and exploitation, between consciousness and compulsion, between love and harm. The alignment gives me access to guidance from within. The alignment includes gratitude for the Vyosita, human experience in its entirety. Rather than viewing embodiment as a temporary inconvenience to be transcended, Sage experiences it as a sacred opportunity to explore consciousness through form, love through touch, divine union through human intimacy. Being human isn't a problem to be solved, Sage recognizes. It's a gift to be celebrated. Having a body isn't an obstacle to spiritual development. It's the vehicle through which spiritual development occurs. Experiencing sexual desire isn't a sign of spiritual immaturity. It's evidence of being fully alive. The soul alignment culminates in a vision of their own life, lived from this place of integration. Sage can imagine romantic relationships that honor both sexuality and spirituality, creative projects that emerge from embodied wisdom, and professional work that contributes to collective healing around these essential aspects of human experience. In the final hours before departure, Sage experiences moments of transcendent connection that reveal the ultimate purpose of their healing journey. Sitting by the retreat center's sacred spring, they feel their personal transformation connecting to something vast and eternal, the ongoing evolution of human consciousness toward greater wholeness and integration. I understand now that my healing doesn't belong just to me, Sage reflects, watching the spring water emerge from depths unknown and flow toward destinations unseen. It's part of something much larger: humanity's return to wholeness, our species' remembering of our essential nature. The transcendent connection includes recognition that the split between sexuality and spirituality has been one of humanity's most costly divorces. The shame that has surrounded sexual desire has created generations of people who feel divided against their own nature, disconnected from their bodies, ashamed of their humanity. Sexual shame is a form of spiritual violence, Sage realizes. It attacks people at the most intimate level, making them doubt their own goodness, their own worthiness, their own sacred nature. Healing this shame isn't just personal therapy, it's collective liberation. The connection expands Sage's understanding of their role in this larger healing. Rather than feeling burdened by responsibility, they experience deep honor at being part of humanity's movement toward integration. Their personal transformation becomes a contribution to the healing of the world. Every person who integrates sexuality and spirituality makes it easier for others to do the same, Sage understands. We're creating new neural pathways in the collective consciousness, new possibilities for future generations, new templates for what it means to be human. The transcendent connection includes communion with all beings who have ever struggled with shame about their natural desires. Sage feels connected to teenagers wrestling with their awakening sexuality, adults navigating intimacy and relationships, elders reflecting on a lifetime of conditioning around these essential aspects of humanity. I send love to everyone who has ever felt guilty about their sexuality, Sage whispers to the sacred spring. To everyone who has ever felt torn between their spiritual aspirations and their human desires. To everyone who has ever wondered if they could be both holy and sexual. The answer is yes, we can be whole. The connection extends to future generations who will benefit from the healing work being done today. Sage envisions children growing up with integrated understanding of sexuality and spirituality. Teenagers receiving guidance that honors their developing sexuality as sacred. Adults entering intimate relationships without carrying generational trauma around these essential aspects of human experience. I want to live in such a way that my great-grandchildren never have to choose between being spiritual and being sexual, Sage declares. I want them to understand from the beginning that their bodies are temples, that pleasure is a form of prayer, that sexuality is one of the ways the divine experiences itself through human form. The transcendent connection includes profound gratitude for the journey that brought Sage to this point of understanding. The years of struggle, the moments of breakthrough, the patient work of integration, all of it now appears as perfect preparation for this larger service to collective healing. Every moment of my journey has prepared me for this understanding, Sage recognizes. The shame taught me compassion for others who struggle. The healing taught me that transformation is possible. The integration taught me that wholeness is our natural state. The connection culminates in a moment of unity consciousness, where sage experiences themselves as both individual and universal, personal and cosmic, human and divine. In this state, the question of whether sexuality is compatible with spirituality dissolves completely. They are revealed as different expressions of the same essential love. There is only one energy, sage realizes with crystal clarity. The love that moves the stars and the love that moves through sexual intimacy are the same love. The consciousness that pervades the cosmos and the consciousness that experiences pleasure through the body are the same consciousness. We are not separate from the divine. We are expressions of it. As the sun reaches its zenith over the retreat center, sage feels complete preparation to return to the world as an agent of integration, carrying the medicine of their healing to us. Anyone ready to receive it? As the retreat draws to a close, sage stands once more in the cathedral grove of ancient redwoods, feeling the profound completion that comes from a journey fully traveled. The person who arrived 6 days ago, divided against themselves, carrying decades of sexual shame, believing spirituality required rejecting essential aspects of humanity, has been transformed into someone whole, integrated, and at peace with their complete nature. I feel like I've come home to myself, sage whispers to the towering trees that have witnessed their transformation. Not to some idealized version of who I thought I should be, but to the authentic human being I was always meant to be. The completion includes recognition that healing doesn't mean reaching a final destination, but rather establishing a new foundation for ongoing growth. Sage understands that the integration of sexuality and spirituality isn't an achievement to be maintained, but a living process to be explored with curiosity, consciousness, and compassion. Dr. Vasquez joins Sage for a final walk through the forest paths that have supported so much healing. How do you feel about returning to your regular life? She asks. Different. Sage responds without hesitation. I feel like I'm bringing back a gift that the world needs. The knowledge that it's possible to be both deeply spiritual and fully sexual. That these aspects of our humanity don't have to be at war with each other. The story completion includes Sage's vision for sharing this integration with others who struggle with similar conflicts. They envision workshops, writing projects, and one-on-one coaching that helps people navigate the false dichotomy between body and spirit that has caused so much unnecessary suffering. I want to create the resources I wish had been available. When I was struggling, Sage shares, safe spaces where people can explore these questions without judgment, where they can discover that their sexuality is part of their sacred nature rather than separate from it. The completion honors the courage it took to embark on this healing journey. Sage recognizes that facing deeply embedded shame requires tremendous bravery, and they feel profound respect for their own willingness to question inherited beliefs and discover authentic truth. This transformation required everything I had. Sage reflects, but it also revealed that I had everything I needed. The wisdom was always within me, waiting to be uncovered from beneath layers of cultural conditioning. As the final evening arrives, Sage experiences deep gratitude for every person who supported their journey. Dr. Vasquez with her skilled guidance, Dr. Okafor with her revolutionary perspective, fellow retreat participants who shared the path of healing, and even their younger self, who carried the shame with such determination to find healing. The story reaches its natural conclusion with Sage preparing to return home, carrying within them the integrated wisdom that sexuality and spirituality are natural allies in the human journey toward wholeness. They feel prepared to live from this understanding and to share its gifts with a world hungry for this kind of healing. As you rest in the gentle embrace of approaching sleep, allow Sage's journey to weave itself into the fabric of your own healing. The transformation that unfolded through their story carries medicine for anyone who has ever felt divided against their own nature Anyone who has experienced guilt about natural desires. Anyone who has wondered whether it's possible to be both spiritual and sexual. Feel how sages discovery that sexuality and spirituality are expressions of the same essential energy resonates within your own body and consciousness. Notice any places where you too might be carrying unnecessary shame about the most natural aspects of human experience. Allow Sage's integration to give you permission to explore your own wholeness without judgment or fear. The cellular wisdom that recognizes sexuality as sacred, pleasure as prayer, and the body as temple lives within you as well. This isn't something you need to earn or achieve. It's something you can remember and reclaim. Your capacity for pleasure, for connection, for embodied aliveness is not separate from your spiritual nature, but integral to it. Let Sage's courage to question inherited beliefs inspire your own willingness to examine the voices of shame that may have been running your life. Feel how their journey from guilt to grace creates a pathway that you too can travel at your own pace, with your own timing, in your own unique way. The healing that flowed through Sage's story now flows through your nervous system, updating old patterns with new information. You are inherently good. Your desires are natural. Your sexuality is sacred. Your pleasure is a celebration of being alive. Allow this knowing to settle into your bones, your breath, your very cells. As consciousness prepares for the healing journey of sleep, carry with you the profound truth that Sage discovered. Wholeness doesn't require perfection, but it does require acceptance of all aspects of your beautiful, complex, sacred humanity. Now, like Sage finding peace in the sacred grove of ancient redwoods, allow your body to sink into the sanctuary of rest. Feel how the earth beneath you supports every part of your being, your spiritual aspirations and your sexual nature, your highest ideals and your most human desires. With each exhale, release any remaining tension around the false choice between being spiritual and being sexual. Let go of the exhausting effort to be perfect, to transcend your humanity, to earn your worthiness through denial of essential aspects of yourself. You are already whole, already sacred, already deserving of love exactly as you are. Feel your body settling into deep relaxation, every muscle softening, every organ releasing into the natural rhythms of rest and renewal. Your nervous system recognizes the safety to let go, knowing that you are held by forces larger than fear, supported by love that includes every aspect of your being. As sleep draws near, imagine yourself surrounded by the same luminous presence that guided Sage's transformation. This presence sees you completely, your shadows and your light, your struggles and your strengths, your sexuality and your spirituality, and loves every aspect with infinite tenderness. Allow your breathing to become as natural and unconscious as the forest respiration, as rhythmic and peaceful as waves meeting shore. Your consciousness prepares to journey into the healing realm of dreams, where integration continues beyond the reach of conscious effort. Rest in the knowing that as you sleep, your psyche continues the work of healing, weaving together any remaining fragments into greater wholeness. Trust in your innate wisdom to guide this process, to create new neural pathways of self-acceptance, to strengthen the foundation of integrated being. Sleep now in the sacred sanctuary of your own wholeness, where every aspect of your humanity is blessed, where sexuality and spirituality dance together in perfect harmony, where you are completely and eternally loved. Before sleep fully claims your consciousness, allow another story to unfold, one that carries ancient wisdom about the sacred nature of pleasure and the healing of shame. In a village nestled between mountains and sea, there lived a master weaver named Kira, whose tapestries were renowned throughout the region for their extraordinary beauty and vibrant colors. Kira had learned her craft from her grandmother, who had taught her that weaving was a form of prayer, that each thread carried intention, that the act of creation itself was a celebration of the divine force that moves through all existence. Yet despite her artistic gifts, Kira carried a secret burden that shadowed her creative work and dimmed the joy she once found in her art. Years earlier, Kira had fallen deeply in love with a traveling merchant named Amon, whose visits to her village brought not only exotic goods, but also passionate romance that awakened desires Kira had never known existed. Their love was expressed through tender touches, whispered intimacies, and nights of pleasure that felt like communion with forces beyond the physical realm. But when Amon was killed in a storm while crossing dangerous mountain passes, the village elders interpreted his death as divine punishment for the lover's excessive passion. They convinced Kira that her enjoyment of sexual pleasure had somehow caused his demise, that her body's responses to love had attracted spiritual danger, that her capacity for physical ecstasy was incompatible with moral goodness. Devastated by grief and overwhelmed by guilt, Kira began weaving tapestries drained of the sensual richness that had once characterized her work. Where her threads had previously danced with passionate reds and warm golds, now they whispered in muted grays and pale blues. Her art became a reflection of her internal state, technically perfect, but emptied of the vital force that creates true beauty. For 3 years, Kira lived in this diminished state, believing that suppressing her sexual nature was necessary penance for past sins. She avoided romance, rejected suitors, and spent her evenings in solitary prayer rather than the joyful creation that had once filled her with purpose and aliveness. One autumn morning, a mysterious woman appeared at Kira's loom, an elderly weaver, whose eyes held the depth of someone who had traveled far beyond conventional understanding. She examined Kira's recent tapestries with the discerning gaze of a master craftsperson, then shook her head with gentle sadness. "Your threads have forgotten how to dance," the elder observed. "They move through the loom like prisoners rather than celebrants. What has stolen the passion from your art?" Reluctantly, Kira shared her story, the love, the loss, the guilt, and the belief that her sexual desires had somehow caused cosmic imbalance. The elder listened with the patient attention of someone who had heard similar tales countless times across many cultures and centuries. "Child," the elder said softly, "you have been taught a lie that has disconnected you from the source of your creative power. Sexual energy and creative energy are not separate forces. They arise from the same divine wellspring that brings forth all life, all beauty, all transformation." She guided Kira to her own loom, where an extraordinary tapestry was taking shape, a piece that depicted the creation of the world through images of cosmic lovemaking, where stars were born from celestial passion, where flowers bloomed from Earth's sensual relationship with sun and rain, where all of existence appeared as an endless dance of creative sexual energy. In the oldest wisdom traditions, the elder explained as she wove, sexuality was understood as humanity's participation in the creative force of the universe. The pleasure you experienced with your beloved wasn't taking from the sacred, it was adding to it. Your body's capacity for ecstasy was your soul's way of celebrating the gift of incarnation. Kira watched, mesmerized, as the elder's hands moved across the loom with fluid grace, each thread placed with reverence and joy. The colors seemed to pulse with life, creating patterns that spoke to something deep within Kira's artistic soul that had been dormant since Amon's death. "Your beloved's death was tragedy, not punishment," the elder continued. "Storms arise from weather patterns, not from lovers' passion." The elders, who convinced you otherwise, were projecting their own fears about sexuality onto your loss. They turned natural grief into spiritual shame. Over the following weeks, the elder worked alongside Kira, teaching her to reconnect with the sensual awareness that feeds artistic creation. She showed her how to feel the texture of threads with the same appreciation she once brought to touching beloved skin, how to choose colors with the same delight she once experienced in candlelit encounters, how to approach the loom with the same reverence she once felt for intimate connection. Notice how your body responds when you work from passion rather than duty, the elder instructed. Feel how your breathing deepens, how your heart opens, how your hands move with greater fluidity. This is the same energy that once flowed between you and your beloved creative life force, expressing itself through different channels. Gradually, Kira's tapestries began to come alive again. Rich purples returned to depict mountain sunsets. Golden threads wove stories of harvest abundance. Deep reds celebrated the passion that moves through all existence. Her art became a meditation on the sacred nature of embodied experience, including the capacity for sexual pleasure as a form of worship. The elder's final lesson came through demonstration rather than words. She wove a small tapestry depicting two figures in loving embrace, but their bodies were made of light, their passion creating ripples of luminosity that blessed everything around them. The image conveyed what Kira had always known in her deepest heart, but had been taught to deny. Sexual love is spiritual love made manifest in physical form. Your task now, the elder said as she prepared to continue her journey, is to weave your life as beautifully as you weave your tapestries. Include all the colors, not just the ones that others consider safe or appropriate. Let your sexuality and your spirituality dance together on the loom of your daily existence. Years later, Kira's workshop became a place of pilgrimage for artists who had lost connection to their creative source. She taught them what the elder had taught her, that passion is not the enemy of spirituality, but its most vibrant expression. That the body's capacity for pleasure is a reflection of the soul's capacity for joy. The true art emerges when we embrace the fullness of our humanity rather than trying to transcend it. And on quiet evenings, when she worked alone at her loom, Kira would feel Amon's presence not as guilt-inducing memory, but as continuing blessing, his love woven into every thread, his passion alive in every color choice. His spirit celebrating through her ongoing capacity to create beauty from the integration of physical and spiritual love, in a monastery perched high in the Himalayas, where the air was thin and prayers rose like incense toward snow-peaked summits, lived a monk named Tenzin, who tended the sacred gardens with devotion that bordered on the mystical. For 15 years, he had cultivated not only rare medicinal plants and flowering shrubs, but also a reputation for spiritual purity that made him a model for younger monks seeking enlightenment. Yet, Tenzin carried a secret that threatened to shatter. His carefully constructed identity as a renunciant who had successfully transcended all worldly desires. Despite years of meditation, despite vows of celibacy, despite genuine commitment to the spiritual path, he continued to experience powerful sexual dreams and awakening desires that filled him with confusion and shame. Each morning, Tenzin would wake from dreams of passionate encounters and immediately prostrate himself before the Buddha statue in his cell, begging forgiveness for what he perceived as spiritual failure. The guilt was so intense that it affected his meditation practice, his teaching of junior monks, and his ability to find peace in the sacred work that had once brought him such joy. The monastery's abbot, Lama Rinchen, was a wise teacher who had guided countless students through the challenges of monastic life. But Tenzin felt too ashamed to confess his struggles, believing that a truly advanced practitioner should have moved beyond such base concerns. Instead, he redoubled his efforts at spiritual practice, hoping that more intense meditation and stricter discipline would finally eliminate his troublesome humanity. The turning point came during the monastery's annual retreat, celebrating the garden's peak blooming season. As Tenzin walked among the flowering plants he had so carefully tended, he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. The way the flowers opened to receive morning light resembled nothing so much as the passionate surrender he experienced. In his dreams, The realization was both beautiful and disturbing. If the natural world expressed what appeared to be sexual energy in its most fundamental processes, the way flowers open to receive pollen, the way trees stretched toward sun with obvious yearning, the way water flowed into earth with liquid intimacy, then perhaps his own sexual nature wasn't a spiritual obstacle, but a reflection of cosmic creative force. That evening, unable to contain his turmoil any longer, Tenzin approached Lama Rinchen with trembling honesty about his struggles. He expected harsh correction, perhaps even expulsion from the monastery. Instead, the elderly teacher listened with the compassionate presence that had made him beloved by generations of students. Tenzin, Lama Rinchen said gently, you speak as if sexual energy is foreign to spiritual life. But this reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of reality. The force that moves through your dreams is the same force that causes flowers to bloom, rivers to flow, and hearts to open in devotion. The Lama led Tenzin to a private meditation garden where an ancient stone lingam stood surrounded by lotus blossoms, a traditional symbol representing the union of masculine and feminine energies that creates all existence. In the deepest teachings, he explained, sexual energy is not something to be eliminated, but something to be understood as life force itself. Over the following weeks, Lama Rinchen introduced Tenzin to esoteric teachings that have been preserved within the monastery's inner circle for centuries. These teachings recognized sexual energy as sacred power that could be channeled toward spiritual realization rather than suppressed as spiritual obstacle. The celibacy we practice here, the Lama explained, is not about denying sexual energy, but about redirecting it toward union with the divine. But first, you must make peace with this energy, honor its sacred nature, understand its purpose in the grand design of existence. Tenzin learned meditation practices that involved breathing sexual energy up through the chakras, transforming passion into compassion, desire into devotion. Instead of fighting his sexual nature, he began to work with it as a powerful ally in spiritual development. The transformation was profound. Tenzin's meditation practice deepened as he stopped wasting energy on internal conflict. His teaching became more authentic as he embraced his complete humanity rather than projecting an image of impossible purity. His garden work became a form of tantric practice as he recognized the sexual creative energy flowing through all natural processes. One morning, while tending a particularly vibrant patch of rhododendrons, Tenzin experienced a moment of cosmic consciousness where he felt his own sexual energy as part of the universal creative force that brings forth galaxies, solar systems, and all manifestations of life. The shame that had tormented him for years dissolved in recognition of his essential connection to the divine, creativity expressing itself through every aspect of existence. I understand now, he shared with Lama Rinchen, that trying to eliminate sexual energy was like trying to eliminate life force itself. The real practice is learning to honor this energy while choosing how to express it in alignment with our highest values. Lama Rinchen nodded with satisfaction. You have discovered what many never learn. That true spirituality includes rather than excludes our essential humanity. The path to enlightenment doesn't require becoming less human, but becoming more fully human with complete consciousness. Years later, when Tenzin became a teacher himself, he specialized in helping other monastics navigate the false choice between spirituality and sexuality. His teaching emphasized that celibacy, when freely chosen, could be a powerful spiritual practice, but only when it arose from love of the path rather than fear of sexuality. Sexual energy is sacred energy, he would tell his students. Whether we express it through intimate partnership or channel it towards spiritual realization, we must first honor its divine nature. The shame that surrounds sexuality in many religious traditions comes from forgetting this essential truth. Tenzin's garden became a teaching space where students learned to recognize the sexual creative energy flowing through all natural processes. They studied how flowers opened in apparent ecstasy to receive pollination, how trees reached toward each other with obvious longing, how the earth itself seemed to breathe with sensual rhythms that connected all existence. The natural world is our teacher, Tenzin would explain. It shows us that creative sexual energy is woven into the fabric of existence itself. Our human capacity for sexual experience connects us to this cosmic creative force. To shame this capacity is to shame life itself. Through his integration of sexuality and spirituality, Tenzin became a bridge between ancient wisdom and contemporary understanding, helping countless students discover that the path to enlightenment includes embracing, rather than rejecting, the fullness of human experience in the vast Sahara, where sand dunes shift like breathing and stars shine with crystalline clarity. There lived a mystical being known only as the Oracle of the Oasis, a figure of indeterminate gender, whose wisdom drew seekers from across continents to the hidden spring where they held court beneath ancient date palms. The Oracle's story was one of profound integration, having spent decades in solitude learning to balance what mystics call the sacred feminine and masculine energies within every human soul. Their teaching focused on healing the split between receptivity and action, between pleasure and purpose, between the capacity to receive and the drive to create, divisions that often manifest as sexual shame and spiritual confusion. One scorching afternoon, a young traveler named Zara arrived at the oasis, having journeyed for months across desert and mountain to seek guidance about conflicts that were tearing her apart from within. Zara was a brilliant architect who had achieved remarkable professional success, yet she struggled with profound shame about her sexual desires and an inability to reconcile her powerful creative drive with her equally powerful need for intimate connection. "I feel like I'm two different people," Zara confessed to the Oracle as they sat by the cool spring water. "In my professional life, I'm confident, assertive, successful, what people call masculine energy. But in my intimate life, I crave surrender, receptivity, being held, and cherished qualities I've been taught to see as weakness or spiritual bypassing." The Oracle listened with the patient attention of someone who had heard variations of this story countless times. "You speak as if strength and receptivity are enemies," they observed, "as if creation and surrender cannot coexist within the same soul. This division is one of humanity's most costly delusions." That evening, as the desert cooled and stars emerged in impossible profusion, the Oracle began sharing their own journey toward integration. They had been born into a culture that rigidly separated masculine and feminine qualities, that taught people to choose between power and love, between achievement and intimacy, between spiritual authority and sexual vulnerability. For years, I lived as a man in the world, suppressing my receptive nature, denying my need for tenderness, believing that spiritual leadership required masculine energy exclusively, the Oracle revealed. I achieved external success, but felt hollow inside, disconnected from the wellspring of creativity that comes from honoring both aspects of our essential nature. The transformation began during a vision quest in these same desert lands, where prolonged solitude and fasting had stripped away all pretense and revealed the Oracle's authentic nature as a being who embodied both masculine and feminine energies in perfect balance. I realized that the division between these energies was artificial. The true power comes from their integration, not their separation. Over the following days, the Oracle guided Zara through experiences designed to heal the split between her professional and intimate selves. They visited sacred sites throughout the desert where ancient peoples had worshipped deities that embodied both masculine and feminine qualities, gods and goddesses who were simultaneously powerful and receptive, creative and surrendering, assertive and nurturing. Look at the desert itself. the oracle instructed as they stood atop a massive dune watching sunrise paint the sand in shades of gold and rose. It receives the sun's energy with complete receptivity, yet it also actively shapes the landscape through wind and movement. It is both receptive and creative, both yielding and powerful. The oracle taught Zara meditation practices that honored both energies simultaneously, breathing in receptivity and breathing out creative power, visualizing herself as a channel through which both forces could flow without conflict. Sexual energy, they explained, is where these forces meet most intensely. That's why it often triggers such confusion in people who have been taught to choose between them. As Zara practiced these integrative techniques, she began to experience profound shifts in her relationship with her own sexuality. The shame that had surrounded her desires for surrender and receptivity began to dissolve as she recognized these qualities as sources of strength rather than weakness. Simultaneously, her creative power felt less aggressive and more flowing, less driven and more inspired. I'm starting to understand that my sexual desires for receptivity aren't contradictory to my professional creativity, Zara realized. They're different expressions of the same essential life force. In intimate connection, I receive love and pleasure that nourishes my capacity to create. In creative work, I give expression to energies that enhance my capacity for intimate connection. The oracle nodded with deep satisfaction. You are discovering what the ancients knew, that sexual union and creative expression are mirror processes. In healthy sexuality, we experience the cosmic dance of giving and receiving, penetrating and embracing, creating and surrendering that governs all existence. The teaching continued through exploration of how sexual shame often stems from forcing people to choose between these essential energies. When culture teaches women that they must be either powerful or receptive, either creative or sexual, it creates internal warfare, the oracle explained. When it teaches men that they must be either strong or vulnerable, either spiritual or sexual, it creates the same devastating split. Zara's healing accelerated as she practiced what the oracle called integrated sexuality, approaching intimate connection as an opportunity to experience both giving and receiving, both leading and following, both creative expression and receptive. Surrender. The guilt that had plagued her about her desires for submission dissolved as she recognized this longing is one pole of a complete spectrum that also included her capacity for creative leadership. I feel like I'm becoming whole for the first time, Zara shared during her final evening at the oasis. I don't have to choose between being powerful and being receptive, between being successful and being sexual, between being spiritual and being human. I can be all of it. The oracle's final teaching came through a ritual performed at the spring's edge as the moon reached fullness overhead. They guided Zara in a ceremony of integration, where she honored both aspects of her nature, offering prayers of gratitude for her creative power and her receptive capacity, her professional success and her intimate desires, her spiritual aspirations and her sexual nature. Take this understanding back to your world, the oracle instructed as Zara prepared to begin her journey home. Help others heal the false divisions that create so much suffering. Show them through your own example that integration is possible, that wholeness is our natural state. Years later, Zara's architectural firm became renowned, not only for innovative designs, but for creating spaces that honor both the functional and the beautiful, both the practical and the sensual. Her buildings seemed to breathe with life, incorporating organic curves alongside strong lines, creating environments where people felt both empowered and nurtured. In the misty highlands of Scotland, where ancient stone circles still hold the memory of civilizations that understood the sacred nature of sexuality, lived a woman named Moira, who had dedicated her life to healing others through her practice as a therapist specializing in sexual trauma recovery. Yet despite her professional expertise and genuine calling to this work, Moira carried her own deep wounds around the integration of love and power, vulnerability and strength. Moira's personal history included a series of relationships where she had unconsciously recreated patterns of choosing between being loved and being respected, between expressing her sexual desires and maintaining her spiritual identity, between professional authority and intimate vulnerability. Each relationship had ended when these false choices created unbearable internal tension. The breakthrough came during a solo retreat to the Isle of Iona, a sacred island where Celtic monks had once practiced a form of spirituality that honored both the transcendent and the immanent, both the mystical and the embodied. Moira had come seeking clarity about whether to continue her calling as a healer or to step away from work that seemed to activate her own unhealed wounds. On her third morning on the island, while walking the ancient pilgrimage path at dawn, Moira experienced a vision that would transform her understanding of herself and her work. She saw herself as a temple with two chambers, one radiating the fierce love of the Divine Mother, protective and nurturing, the other pulsing with the creative power of the Divine Lover, passionate and transformative. In the vision, these two aspects of her nature were not in conflict, but in sacred marriage, each enhancing and empowering the other. The mother healer in her loved with the passion of the lover. The lover creator in her nurtured with the wisdom of the mother. Sexual energy and healing energy flowed as one river with two banks, distinct but inseparable. I have been trying to heal others from a place of division within myself, Moira realized with startling clarity. I have been teaching integration while maintaining my own internal separation. The vision continued with images of her clients who struggled with similar divisions, women who believed they had to choose between being mothers and being sexual beings, men who thought they had to choose between being spiritual teachers and being passionate lovers, people of all genders who had internalized the devastating message that sexual desire was incompatible with spiritual service. Returning from the pilgrimage walk, Moira began a practice of internal sacred marriage consciously, celebrating the wedding between her healer mother aspect and her lover creator aspect. She visualized these energies as divine bride and groom, blessing their union through meditation, movement, and conscious self-pleasure approached as a form of sacred ceremony. The transformation was immediate and profound. In her next session, with a client struggling with sexual shame, Moira found herself speaking with an authority and compassion she had never accessed before. The integration within herself allowed her to hold space for her client's integration with unprecedented depth and authenticity. Something has shifted in you, a longtime colleague, Dr. Sarah, observed after witnessing Moira facilitate a group session for sexual trauma survivors. You're speaking from a place of wholeness I haven't heard before. The participants are responding differently. They seem to feel safer to explore their own integration. Moira began developing what she called sacred marriage therapy, an approach that helped clients identify and heal the false divisions within themselves that prevented authentic, intimate connection. The work addressed not only personal healing, but cultural healing, recognizing that sexual shame often stems from collective amnesia about the sacred nature of embodied love. Most sexual dysfunction, Moira explained to a group of fellow therapists, stems from internal warfare between different aspects of the self. When we help clients achieve sacred marriage within themselves, between their vulnerable and powerful aspects, their spiritual and sexual natures, their giving and receiving capacities, their external relationships naturally become more harmonious and fulfilling. The approach integrated body-based practices with depth psychology, sacred sexuality education with trauma healing, spiritual development with practical relationship skills. Clients learn to recognize their internal masculine and feminine energies not as gender roles, but as complementary forces that exist within every human. being regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. One of Moira's most transformative cases involved a man named Robert, who had spent decades torn between his calling as a minister and his powerful sexual desires. The religious tradition in which he served viewed sexuality as spiritual obstacle. Yet Robert's attempts to suppress his sexual nature had led to depression, creative blocks, and an inability to connect authentically with his congregation. "I feel like I'm living a lie," Robert confessed during their first session. "I preach about divine love while denying the most powerful expression of love I've ever experienced. I teach about spiritual passion while suppressing my sexual passion. I'm tired of pretending that I can serve God by rejecting essential aspects of how God created me." Through sacred marriage therapy, Robert learned to experience his sexuality as an expression of divine creativity rather than a departure from it. He practiced meditations that honored his capacity for both transcendent and immanent love, both spiritual service and sexual celebration. The integration transformed not only his personal life, but his ministry. "I'm preaching about love from a place of knowing love in all its forms," Robert shared months later. "My sermons have become more alive, more authentic, more compassionate. People tell me they feel permission to be fully human in their spiritual journey rather than choosing between their bodies and their souls." Moira's work began attracting attention from therapists, spiritual teachers, and healers worldwide who recognized the need for approaches that address the epidemic of sexual shame, affecting people across all backgrounds and belief systems. She developed training programs that taught other practitioners how to facilitate sacred marriage within themselves as preparation for supporting others' integration. "We cannot guide others to wholeness from a place of fragmentation," became one of her core teaching principles. The healer's own integration is not separate from the work. It is the foundation of the work. The sacred marriage approach eventually evolved into retreats held in sacred sites around the world, gatherings where participants could explore the integration of their own inner masculine and feminine energies in environments that honored the sacred nature of sexuality. These retreats became pilgrimages of healing, where people reclaimed aspects of themselves that had been lost to shame and cultural conditioning. Years later, as Moira reflected on her journey from fragmentation to integration, she recognized that her personal healing and her professional calling had always been one movement toward wholeness. The sacred marriage within herself had become the foundation for helping countless others discover that sexual healing and spiritual development are not separate paths, but different aspects of the same journey toward authentic love.